As a first-year teacher or a first-year teacher to a new campus, one of the most important things you should do is get to know your campus. And there's 3 really important things that I think you should do in order to get to know your campus. Hi, my name is Anne Molesky, and I help music teachers find inspiration and community to promote active music making experiences in their classrooms. The first thing that's really important to do when you go to a new campus is actually not to check out your music room, it's to start talking to people. And there's 3 power players that you should get in touch with if you are starting a new music teacher job. The first is your principal. Now, obviously, this is likely not the first time that you've met with your principal. I'm sure they were in on your interview. I'm sure they were part of your hiring committee. I'm sure that you have some sort of relationship with this person already. My recommendation is that you should contact your principal, either phone call, email, whatever works, to set up a meeting. And before you go into that meeting, I would have a fairly rough idea or a clear vision, if you so choose, about what you want your teaching experience to look like at that campus in terms of scheduling, in terms of programming, whatever it might be. Maybe they had an after-school choir, maybe they had an after-school orff ensemble, maybe that was embedded into the day. Maybe they had music class twice a week and they're moving to once a week, or it was once a week and they are open to moving to twice a week, whatever it might be. And I would enter that meeting and ask the principal 2 very important questions. What things have you loved about music here at this school? And what things would you like to consider doing differently? And I would leave it kind of open-ended in that way because we're not looking to throw anybody under the bus. But at the same time, it's difficult to come into a position, particularly if you're taking over for a beloved music teacher, and make changes. And maybe you don't want to make any changes in your first year. Maybe it's safer to do that depending on that school community, but they might also be looking for something completely different. And so knowing what types of things they really loved and what types of things they would consider or would be open or would like to do differently can be really, really informative for you. After giving your administration an opportunity to share those thoughts, I would bring up any concerns or changes that you think are really, really important with the understanding that maybe things aren't open to change right now. But at least you've had an open dialogue about the types of things you'd like to see. It's evident that you've thought about your position and how it's a powerful position with lots of responsibility because you see all of the kids in the school. And at least that line of communication is now open. So aside from the principal, I would also make sure to get in touch with your parent club or PTA president. And maybe this is a meeting that can happen with your principal, depending on the dynamic. It's kind of nice to do that separately, but I would at least touch base with this individual because they are helping to put on events. Sometimes programs are in collaboration with parent club meetings. And so this is an important contact for you to have an open line of communication with. And last but not least, I would get in touch with the former music teacher. Now, sometimes this isn't possible, and that's okay, but the former teacher at that building, regardless of what their experience is, can give you some information. The only thing I do recommend that you do is take any information with the understanding that that was that teacher's experience in that building with that administration and those teachers and those students. And it does not necessarily dictate your experience. But the previous teacher can give you a good idea of how things have gone, the types of challenges they've had, some really positives that they've had, and hopefully you can start to move everything in a positive direction if it hasn't been that way in the past. So the first thing you should do at your campus has nothing to do with your classroom, but it has to do with making those contacts with those people. The former music teacher, if you want to, and if it's possible, definitely your principal and your parent club president. The next thing you should know about your school is still not about your classroom, but is about traditions. Now, this kind of comes into play with the power players and the meetings and the contacts that you might set up with those people, but it's important to know what types of things are really, really important at this campus. Maybe they've had a grade level program every single year for every single grade, and those are set in stone, and the parents really love them, and it's really important that it stays that way for at least the next year. Maybe every single year there is a holiday program or a Mother's Day tea or a fine arts night. These are all things that maybe you don't find out right away. Hopefully you would in your interview, but there might be little things that music teachers and grade level teachers collaborate on, or things that happen here and there that people like and that people might want to change. Maybe there's a choir and the students love it and it's really important to keep it. Maybe there's been interest in a choir and the past music teacher just didn't have the bandwidth to make it happen, but it's something you're interested in doing. All of these are important things to consider. Again, your first year is not necessarily the time to make changes, but it's good to have an understanding of what the traditions look like and what you might want to do in the future. I think camps are kind of split on like, don't change a thing your first year versus, change everything now if you're going to change it when you first get there. I've heard both sides of that story. I just think it's really important to have those open lines of communication so the truth is kind of in the middle. That way you can know what's happened in the past, what folks like, what they don't, and then the types of things that you would like to do since it's now your program. And last but not least, aside from those traditions and those power players, let's talk about your classroom. You definitely need to check out the physical space. You need to go in and take a look, see if there's been desks, if there's been chairs, if there's carpet, if there's a rug, if there's sit spots, all of those logistics that are important at least for the first weeks of school. Start taking inventory. See what types of manipulatives, puppets, books, instruments, resources are available to you, and ask if there's an opportunity to add more as needed and what kind of that bank of resources or money for resources could look like. Depending on how much or how little you have in your classroom, you might want to start thinking about looking into some grant opportunities or applying for scholarships to start building up your classroom in a way that works for you. For example, if you walk into your classroom and there's an entire class set of ukuleles and you've never played it before in your life and you'd like to learn so that you can use those resources, now's the time to start getting your chops up on the ukulele. Or maybe that's a project for next year or an after-school club or something different. Or maybe you come into your classroom and there's zero barred instruments. And that's something that's really, really important to you. So have a plan and maybe meet with your administration and your parent club president again and start to come up with a plan for what that could look like over the next couple of years. Aside from that, you're not going to hear me say, it's time to print all the posters, it's time to put up all the things, it's time to do all of the pretty stuff around your room, because I think we can get really, really caught up in all of that, and that stuff is fun. And if that's your jam, do it. Jam it up. Get on Teachers Pay Teachers, buy all the things, print it, laminate it to your heart's content. But if it's not your thing, you don't have to feel bad about that. I've always found that my first year at a campus, it takes a little bit of time for things to feel homey. And a lot of things that I slap up on the wall in the beginning are not things that I actually use later on. So I would recommend that you are a little bit selective and curate what happens in your classroom and what you put on the wall in terms of decor and resources for your students to see. However, if that's your jam, I totally get it. But take inventory of those things in your classroom that you might need for the first days of school. So the three things that are really important for a brand new campus are to meet those power players, set up a meeting, have open lines of communication, really understand the traditions at your campus, and decide what's important to people and what they might like to see different. And then last but not least is check out your classroom.